diseases sits in the, okay, I never get this right because I have to make sure that I get this right because I never say it right. Where did I write that down? Oh, here's my notes over here. The National Center for Advancing Technology, Translational Science. See, I never get it right. Anyway, I've had the opportunity to go to some of the events, and NCATS, it's much easier to say NCATS. NCATS does a fabulous job of hosting all of us for Rare Disease Day at the NIH. And one of these days, I really hope that we'll be able to get some tours of the National Institutes of Health. And how many of you really have an understanding of the NIH and what they do and the different institutes? And okay, we've got a couple people, you know, and I think that this is really a national treasure for us. As I've learned more and more about what the NIH does and the different institutes and the brilliant people that are there, and the science that's being done, and some of the, and NCATS in particular, I just have fallen in love with this institute because they are doing some of the most amazing and cool things. And they're really dedicated to people with rare diseases, which, hey, that's us. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Pariser, who's joining us this morning, and really delighted to have you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It doesn't show up on there, unfortunately.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you very much, Susan, and good morning, everyone here in the room and joining us via webcast. It's really my pleasure to be here, and thank you so much for inviting me. So in the next few minutes, I'm just going to go over some of the programs that are offered at the National Center for Advancing Translational Science, also known as NCATS, and I'm just going to say NCATS because it's a lot easier to say, and specifically with the Office of Rare Diseases Research, although I'll talk about some of our other programs and how we're trying to catalyze translational research innovation and why we're doing that. So, you know, where are we now in 2018? And I'm going to reiterate and build on some of the things that Susan already said. But we're really in a time of just tremendous scientific excitement. The science has just moved forward very rapidly, even in the past 5 to 10 years. It's really quite amazing. But the foundational science is advancing very, very fast, and that doesn't always translate into clinical benefit for people, for our health, for the diseases, or it's certainly not going nearly fast enough, or if it does, just the expense is enormous. So that just creates a problem. How do we get the science so it's actionable and moving forward faster to benefit our patients? And so that is basically the mission behind NCATS. Is what we're trying to do is take those discoveries, those innovative methods and technologies. They can be in the clinic, they can be in the lab, they can be in the community. And how can you get these to move forward to impact human disease and conditions? So one of the first questions we're always asked is, what do you mean by translation? It's not your typical definition of language, moving one language to another, but it's this process of turning those observations into medicines, diagnostics, therapeutics, to meet the medical challenges that are out there. And translational science is really the discipline of studying that. So we're disease agnostic. This can be applied to any disease. And it's really trying to focus on the research process, who is essentially, you know, our patient. So putting it another way, here we have, you know, publications, papers, research discoveries, and those are great. But as a patient once told us, you know, I can't, you know, give my child or myself a paper. Well, we want to get those into the clinic, into drugs, and as a way to benefit all of us. So that's where NCATS focuses. So who are we? We're one of the 27 NIH institutes and center, and we're the only one that does focus specifically on the process of translational science. As many of you know, most of NIH, the centers are focused around either an organ like heart, lung, blood, or a therapeutic area like National Cancer Institute. But as I said, we're different. We don't focus on a particular disease. It's trying to improve the scientific process for everyone, every discipline. So NCATS is also the youngest center. It was established in 2012. Some of the programs are quite a bit older than that, though. For instance, the Office of Rare Diseases Research goes back to about 1985. So it's kind of an amalgamation of a number of programs, either new or those that have been existing for a while under the same or a different name. So I'm just going to touch on a couple of, or a few of our major programs. I'll tell you a little bit about Office of Rare Disease Research, or ORDR, a bit of a clunky acronym, Division of Clinical Innovation, the TREND program, and tissue chips. And so I think those may be most relevant to what we're talking about today. So the Office of Rare Diseases Research, our mission is actually quite straightforward. We're trying to accelerate rare diseases research to benefit patients. So again, it's actionable. How do we take what's discovered and try to bring it to patients as efficiently, quickly, cheaply, in the best way that we can? And we do a lot of this through collaborations with patients, researchers, academic institutions, industry, and to try to bring best science together. So I'll just go over a few rare disease quick facts. Susan went over some of them, but I'll just reiterate some of these. So how do you define a rare disease in the United States? That's less than 200,000 affected people in the US. Most rare diseases are far lower prevalence than this. Most rare diseases, a few hundred, a few thousand patients, and sometimes even smaller numbers of patients than that. And rare diseases is actually a misnomer. Rare diseases are not rare. They affect at least 30 million Americans. There are at least 7,000 diseases, but we don't really know how many there are. And the reality is it's probably a lot more than that. And that number is going to continue to increase. Every week, there's between 1 and 3 new rare diseases that are being discovered, and even common conditions are now being broken down into rare diseases. Cancer is a perfect example of this, being more and more defined by mutational subtypes. Some people are estimating that could be as high as 10,000 diseases and many more millions of patients. So with advances in precision medicine, personalized medicine, really this affects all of us, really. So about 80% of our diseases are genetic, and more than half of them manifest in children. And those beautiful children there, those are some of our actual patients. But for cancer, again, nobody really knows. These are estimates, but at least 30–50% of cancers diagnoses are for rare cancers. And most types of cancer are rare. And as Susan said, there's less than 5% of our diseases that have FDA-approved treatments. So add all this together, this is a very large public health concern, and this is where we're really focused on trying to do better. So just a few more quick facts on rare cancers. So rare cancers, again, aren't rare. Out of the 1.7 million diagnoses in 2017, about half a million people were diagnosed with rare cancer or subtypes, and probably is really higher than that. The American Cancer Society actually defines a rare cancer a little bit differently than the Orphan Drug Act. So that's using the definition of less than 6 per 100,000, you still have about 370 different types of rare cancers. All of the lymphomas are rare, about 100 different types, and so all the lymphomas actually fall under rare diseases. So even though the diseases are very different, and as Susan said, no one's story is exactly the same, there are some larger principles that really are pretty common across all rare diseases. And the good news with that is it actually gives us targets that we can try to work on to try to improve the process. So state the obvious, rare disease has small numbers of patients. Well, it's because there's small numbers of patients that all the other challenges come up. A lot of these diseases aren't very well understood. Your story going doctor to doctor to doctor to try to get a diagnosis, that's unfortunately very common. Estimates 5 to 8 years to get a diagnosis. And even if you get a the diagnosis. There's no approved therapy available. And specialists are scattered, patients are scattered. That does present some challenges for clinical trials. And a lot of these diseases are quite diverse, even within the disease. And so you start adding these things all together, presents a few challenges, but for us, I mean, this is certainly important for all research, but collaboration, data sharing, and patient involvement, these are all must-haves. So these are some areas that we have been focusing on to try to improve and to try to leverage, to try to improve the research process. So this is a summary of ORDR's major programs and initiatives, and they basically fall into two categories, knowledge and data, and research and collaborations, which hit on those major themes that I was just talking about. So I'm just going to highlight a few, and the first one I'm going to talk about is the Rare Diseases Clinical Research Network, or the RDCRN. We're not as good as we should be with the acronyms, and these aren't terribly memorable, but we need to do a better job there. But what is the RDCRN? Well, this was actually started as a congressional mandate going back to 2002. And back then, there really wasn't much that existed for rare diseases. And the idea here is that if we could develop centers of excellence and networks, it would be easier for patients to have somewhere to go when they had a rare disease. They would have access to experts and hopefully accelerate both research and diagnosis. And the purpose here was try to facilitate research across centers. Since specialists and patients are dispersed, can we collect people into these networks to accelerate and further research, and also to have multidisciplinary teams applied to the problems. So this was established in 2002, and we're now in our third 5-year award cycle. So these are collaborative agreements, a little different than your usual NIH research agreement, where it's mandated that the award comes with collaboration, data sharing, knowledge sharing. Our current cycle runs from 2014 to 2019, so we're really at the end of our third-year cycle, our 5-year cycle. And we currently have 21 consortia and a data management and coordinating center, which is kind of the glue that holds the network together and facilitates this knowledge sharing and interactions. And this is the largest rare disease clinical research network that I'm aware of anywhere in the world, and it's the only one that really has this unique structure. And what is required, that 3 or more diseases or conditions or some kind of a unifying therapeutic theme need to come together to form a research consortium. Has to be multi-center. It has to have involvement of at least one patient advocacy group, and the reality is all of them have more than that. It has to have at least 2 studies, and all of them have more than that. And it also has a training component. And not only is this a collaboration amongst the academic community and a multidisciplinary approach, it's also a collaboration across NIH. So NCATS is a lead center, but we partner with 9 other NIH institutes to try to bring best science and collaboration to bear. So this is a very busy slide. I have left the website below if you'd like to take a look, but these are our current 21 consortia. They're extremely diverse. For example, consortia formed around like an organ, like a rare lung consortium or brittle bone consortium. Some are around mutations, some are around organelles, mitochondrial diseases, for example. So it's very diverse. We don't currently have a cancer consortium. However, NCI does participate. We have had cancer consortiums in the past, and we are encouraging trying to have at least one for the next cycle. We hope. We're encouraging applications. So every consortium, as I mentioned, there's a collaboration between the researchers, NIH, patient groups, trainees, multidisciplinary aspects. So this has worked very well. We're currently covering more than 200 diseases in our 21 consortia. We have about 450 clinical centers worldwide, and about 43,000 patients are participating, which for rare diseases is huge. Hundreds of trainees, over 120 patient advocacy groups. So this is all good news. It's a model that really does work. And good news is we're planning a 4th cycle. So this actually, there's a funding announcement that published at the beginning of June, on June 8th, and it's on the street right now. Our receipt date is October 9th. So I encourage any of you, there's researchers listening in, but also patient groups, please try to get together. If you'd like to put together a Cutaneous Lymphoma Foundation, that would make a great consortium. These are competitive awards, but I would encourage you to look into this and see if this, fits your research initiative. So this is a snapshot of our website. I put the link up there, and the funding announcements are circled there. It's a little lengthy. I can't go into it now, but it's that same concept of multiple diseases, multidisciplinary approaches. And very importantly is patients are really a critical component to this. Patient leadership, patient involvement, patient expertise. It's mandatory. So please, keep that in mind. And here we're also having informational webinars. So next week, next Wednesday, we have our first webinar. We have another one in July. If you just click on these links right around the time, you're right in. You can listen in. They'll be recorded. Information will put up on the web. And we'll also have a frequently asked questions website. So if you're even thinking about this, please dial in and listen to this, because it is an opportunity, and it does only come around once every 5 years. So why should you do this? Well, as I said, this has been a very successful program. And what we've heard from our investigators, but our patients as well, is that, well, before we were part of the RDCRN, we were nowhere. Now we've got infrastructure, we have multiple centers, we have experts, we're publishing. And this is one regular media news article on the Lysosomal Disease Network, which I'll just profile here. So the LDN is actually one of the larger networks. It's very well established. They do a lot of work. And they actually initiated the very first gene editing trial anywhere ever in humans last fall. So while this was put forward by a private company, Sangamo, what happened is the trial was essentially dropped into the network. They had the patients identified, they had good natural history study data, they had biomarkers, they had endpoints, and that just really facilitated the trial. I don't think they would have been able to get into the clinic as quickly and as well as they did without having this infrastructure available. So that actually started last fall, and this was an article on the first patient to be treated. This is not the CRISPR-Cas9 gene editing. It's the older zinc finger technology, but it is actual, clinical treatment of patients with gene editing, which is, very exciting. And there's a follow-up in March, and they're now up to a third patient that we are aware of. Sangamo is a private company. They aren't obligated to share their information. If there were, for example, a bad safety signal, we probably would have heard about it. So, we're very hopeful. And certainly, I think there's just a lot to learn in this arena. So we're looking forward to hearing more about this. So now I'm going to go to the other side of the list here and just focus a little bit on some of our knowledge and data. I'm calling this the GUARD cluster. So GUARD is the Genetics and Rare Diseases Information Center. So this also was established through the Rare Diseases Act of 2002, much like the RDCRN. And we were directed to establish a public resource for information on rare diseases. Finding reliable information about all these rare diseases can be very difficult. So this was intended to be a public resource that people could come to get good quality, reliable information. It's primarily focused on the public, but we also get visits from and inquiries from clinicians who are seeing rare diseases they may not be quite as familiar with. So we currently have more than 6,500 rare diseases. Again, this is the largest, best established resource of its kind that I'm aware of. And we formed collaborations with the National Human Genome Research Institute at NIH or NHGRI and OrphanNet, which is a parallel program in Europe. So it's a good source of information. And this is what it looks like. If you went to the main page, it would look like this. just point out a couple of things. There's a search bar where you can type in a disease that you want to look up. Some of the diseases go by many names, so it does help you find based under the many names of what can be the same disease. But also, if you look up on the top left or right side, there's a phone number. So people can also call if you have individual inquiries that you'd like to help with. A common person calling us would be either a parent or a patient who has just been diagnosed with a disease they've never heard of, and they really don't know where to go. They don't even know how to start. So we do get a number of inquiries, and we have genetic counselors actually who handle these calls and try to get people pointed towards the help that they need. So this is a available resource for you. Most people don't come to the homepage. They actually Google it like we all do, Google everything, but and we usually show up number 1 or 2. So this is intended really to be an open resource for anybody who needs it. So I think as kind of a sign of the times, this is a graph of GARD usage over the past 5 or so years. So at the top, this is the number of people coming to the website, and we're about 1.5 million people coming to our website every month. And I think that's really a sign of rare diseases really coming into its own, more commonly known. We have more news stories about rare diseases. There's a lot more awareness around rare diseases, but with that comes the need for more information. So the blue line is last year, which I think you can see is quite a bit above years before, which again, taken as a good sign. But this year is that green line, which is more or less going straight up. So I think this is really kind of a surrogate for the way both research and medical care, as we get more knowledge about this, we understand these diseases better, and as we get better at treating them, we're going to have more and more people investigating rare diseases. So I think it's all positive. And mirroring that below is the inquiries a month. And we get about 1,000 inquiries a month now, which again is just going up really exponentially, not creeping up. So again, we'll take that as good news. So just touch on a couple of other things in the GARD website. GARD is an old program. It's more than 15 years old. But these are 2 new programs. So the one on the, yes, you're right again, is what we're calling RADAR, and that stands for Rare Diseases Registry Program. So this was a pilot program that started about 5 years ago under the other clunky acronym of the GRDR. So this was an attempt to try to establish registries, good quality registries for rare diseases. So I think many of you are aware registries are very important to rare disease research. It's a way to help bring the community together, raise awareness for the disease, provide information, but also to start establishing research programs. A lot of these diseases aren't well understood, and a registry is often a first place to start. So we've been really trying to build registries for all diseases. So the GRDR started with 12 patient groups building new registries. And it did work, but 5 years later, we were still at 12 registries. So 7,000 diseases minus 12, so we still have 6,988 to go. So this was just going way too slow. So we had to regroup and try to come up with a better way to do things. So what we're trying to do instead of build registries is provide best practices, advice, and facilitate ways to get started. So not act so much as a repository, but as an information source. So we're in the process of building this out. So there's not a lot on that website right now, but there is some information. So if this is something that you're working on or would like to learn more about, particularly things like data standards, I'd encourage you to take a look. I'll just say a few more words about the other one on the left, which is the NCATS Toolkit for Patient-Focused Drug Development, which we call the Toolkit. So this is another new program that was actually launched last September. And this was actually a patient-initiated initiative that what happened is some patient groups, and these were very well-established patient groups, came to us and they said, Our foundation's doing really well. We've got our research programs up and running, but it took us a really long time to get there. There's just a lot of things that you have to learn about drug development and getting your research program together, and it can take a long time, a lot of lessons learned across the way. And they said what's happening with them now is they're getting a lot of the newer patient groups coming to them, trying to get started and saying, you know, how did you do this? How did you get started? So they said, wouldn't it be great if there was somewhere patient groups could go and have a lot of these tools and a lot of this advice already existing? We could just tap into it and get started a lot faster. And yeah, that would be great. We thought that was a great idea. So this turned out to be a 2-year partnership with many patient groups to try to stand up this public resource, online resource. It was free, it was accessible, just to help people get started. So that's what we did. And it was primarily focused around the rare disease community, although really this could be useful to almost any drug development program, so everybody is welcome. So it's up online. I encourage you again to take a look. There's an awful lot of things there. We have more than 100 tools. Some of these were actually developed by the patient groups themselves, and some of them are government resources or industry resources, such as NIH or FDA tools. What they have to be is they have to be usable, they have to be accessible, and they have to be practical. They have to address some aspect of getting started, getting your research agenda together. So I'll just show you what that looks like. Okay, so to the right, left. I always have trouble with left, right. To the left that's what the homepage looks like. So the toolkit topic areas are divided into 4 topic areas, or bins as we've been calling them, focusing on discovery or very early phase, preparing for clinical trials and FDA review or FDA interactions, and then post-approval. So as I said, there's about 100 tools there. There's also a getting started tab for people who are just really at the beginning. So we were intending to try to provide useful information for people right at the start, but also all the way through the drug process, even for groups that do have some approved products. So just give you an example of what the getting started tab looks like. If you click either there or there, you get to a web page, and I don't know if you can see that very well, but there's topic areas that have a plus mark. You click on that and it opens up and gives choices of a number of tools that you can go to, or it's a little educational information about some aspect of the drug development. So I'd urge you to take a look there, and it's our intention that this really be a living site. We want this to be very useful to people. We want people to come back. We want people to suggest tools. We want people to give us feedback. So, please take a look. Please go to the About Us contact page. If you have a tool you know about that would be useful to other people, please let us know. If you have suggestions about how this could be better, we'd also like to hear that too. So some of the feedback we've received: 2 topics people really want to hear about right now. People want to hear about more interactions with FDA, and they especially want to hear about things like the patient-focused drug development meetings and process. So we are working with FDA right now to try to get a little bit more information on that. So we do listen to the feedback. We do take what you say very seriously. So please let us know if you have any suggestions. We'd love to hear it. Okay, so I'm going to switch gears then and leave O to RDR and talk about a few of the other things going on at NCATS. As some of you may know, our biggest division by far at NCATS is the Division of Clinical Innovation, which runs the Clinical and Translational Science Awards program, or the CTSAs. So the CTSAs actually has changed names a couple of times. It's been around for about 15, 20 years. And it's now what it focuses on is, again, trying to build this collaborative translational science environment to try to raise all boats, to try to impact clinical research, especially in translational science, really across the spectrum. So what this is this is a very large program and has a more than $500 million budget per year. So there's a lot of research going on, and too much to talk about here and now. But what NCATS does essentially is support the building of this infrastructure around the country. So there's about 60 large academic medical centers around the U.S. that serve as a primary sites for these, and they're organized into what are called hubs. So you have the primary site, you have the regional and local affiliates, and trying to form this national research network with the idea of everybody's trying to work together and share information to try to impact science. And their motto is get more treatments to more patients more quickly. So on the right side are the 4 programmatic initiatives. So streamlining, accelerating clinical research through this infrastructure building. If you have projects, can you drop them into the network and then they get going much faster? You have the Trial Innovation Network, which combines the hubs, recruitment centers, and then trial innovation methods, such as things like one example is the single IRB or the smart IRB. These are ways can we get the clinical operations up and running faster, because as some of you may know, it takes a long time to get a trial just even started. They also have these innovation awards. These are intended to be high risk, high reward type experimental projects. Again, trying to provide the infrastructure to support this kind of research. And then common metrics or data standards, which is a hot topic. So the better we can share data, the better we can combine data, move data, get data to live, the better it's going to be for everyone. So those are their major areas. I put the link up there again, very large network, lots of opportunities for research. So if you can think of any of your projects that fall under these categories, there are opportunities for grants, collaborative awards. Just the one caveat there is that you need to form a partnership within the network. However, there's more than 60 hubs around the U.S. These are the primary sites. They are intentionally scattered across the country, but there's also regional and local affiliates there, with the idea being that any patient should have access to one of the CTSA sites some way, but also researchers and clinicians would have access to the expertise within there. So if you're looking for any kind of support for your projects, I'd urge you to just take a look there and see if it can be fit into the network, and it probably can. So switching gears again, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Therapeutics for Rare and Neglected Diseases program, which is also at NCATS. This is a program that was started in 2010. So the programs I've been talking about now are extramural. That is, we partner with outside institutions. Most of the grant money goes to academic centers for the most part around the country. The intramural program is research that's predominantly done within NIH. So they don't give traditional grants and awards. What they do is they provide expertise and actual research help. So Trend was started specifically for rare diseases, and it serves kind of a dual purpose. So they usually partner with the pharmaceutical or biotech industry, usually smaller companies, but they also partner with academic researchers as well. And people will come to them with a drug development conundrum. They have something they're trying to move forward and it got stuck somewhere. There's some investigational project. So the dual purpose is to enable that particular therapy, but also try to inform the larger issue. Because if it's happening here, it's probably happening somewhere else. So it's again the NCATSian mission of trying to inform the process as well as a specific research question. So they've taken on all kinds of projects for rare diseases. It can be things that happen in the translational space, and they do at times go into clinical trials as well. They do small molecules, and recently they've been doing things like gene therapy and have really done some really exciting work there. So this is also another option for both industry, but also for academic centers for partnering with them for some of those difficult and often cutting edge problems. And the last program I'm going to mention is the tissue chip program, which is run by Dan Tagley. And these are, the formal name is microphysiologic systems, but everybody calls it tissue chip. So what the goal is here is to try to improve upon the information that we get from preclinical modeling. So cell cultures, animal models, they're imperfect. They never recapitulate human disease. So can we do better? So this was an idea of trying to take things like cell culture and combine them with some kind of an IT technology to try to better recapitulate either normal human physiology or human disease. So these tissue chips are actually, it's a platform about this size, the size of a flash drive, that would have, for example, iPS cells or differentiated cells within it to try to form some kind of a microcircuit. So they've come up with the 10 different human physiologic systems, and circulatory, endocrine, cardiac, there. And then this provides a platform to both understand normal physiology, disease physiology, but also to test things. Toxicology, for example, rather than animal models, can we test this on these little chips? Or can you string these chips together to try to form more like an organ system or multi-organ system, or even body on a chip? So this is actually started in 2012, so not very long ago, and it's made just an enormous amount of progress in a very short period of time. So this has been just intensive collaboration. And listed some of the partners over there on the left: private companies, the Defense Department, a few other partners, along with NCATS. And they've gone from just seeing, well, is this possible, to now trying to validate some of these systems. And now this is working on to disease models. So it's moved very fast. And as I mentioned, trying to string multiple organs together, kind of a human body on a chip. And this person there is actually named Chip. So this is there's been over 5,500 publications. It's a very rapidly moving area, and it's really quite exciting. So probably can't see that really well, but so why do this? Well, it's basically trying to be faster than cell culture or animal models, better, recapitulating human disease better, and cheaper, less expensive than these things. So faster, better, cheaper, and it looks like that may be possible. It sounds very space age, but they're really moving along. So, for example, give you one example that's sometimes shown is a lung chip. So you have your alveoli on one side, you have the blood stream on the other, you have the tissue interface, you have the air circulating in the lung side, you have the blood circulating on the blood side, and they even make these chips breathe. So you get the mechanical stresses. It's pretty fascinating. So here's a couple of examples here. They've moved into these specialized tissue chip testing centers now. And if you look up at the right-hand corner, it's a little hard to see, but it's, again, these little chips. They look different depending on who's doing them, but they're about this size. The chips themselves aren't very big. But here's one disease model. This is actually Barth syndrome. Let's see, is it working? Yeah. You can see it moving. So Barth syndrome affects the heart. It's a multi-system disease, but some of the greatest morbidity comes from the heart. So these are heart chips. So the movement is actually kind of the beating of the heart, or I suppose if it were your arm kind of going like this. So the normal one, it's going kind of slowly, but I think you can see it going up and down. The disease model isn't really pulsating at all. And then the one to the far right is in vitro rescue by gene editing. So this is kind of a proof of concept on a chip. So they're doing this for all kinds of diseases now. And the most recent thing was in a non-traditional partnership with NASA. They actually were blasting tissue chips into space. So the goal there was to try to study human physiology in space, being in the zero gravity environment, very hard on the body, is kind of rapid aging. So NASA wanted to study this in the astronauts. But what was very interesting out of this is, so although the tissue chips themselves are pretty small, the system that supports them are actually really big, probably about twice the size of this podium I'm standing at. So you can't really blast multiples of those into space. It's too much weight and too much size to take up on a space shuttle. So one thing NASA is very good at is making things smaller. And through this very non-traditional engineering partnership, they're actually able to get these things down to the size of a shoebox. So through something like this, it just shows that innovation can just help in ways you don't always anticipate. So, I mean, that's great for sending things into space, but it's also great for day-to-day laboratory space and just making this kind of technology a little bit more accessible. And so what does that mean for us? Well, now disease modeling for rare diseases, which, you know, is just perfect venue for a lot of these things, help us understand the disease better, but also we don't have a lot of patients. Patients are very precious. We want to make the most of anything that we learn. You can actually model individual patient variants on these chips. We can look at things for toxicology, efficacy, and just improving our understanding of the disease. So the ones that are in red, those are tissue chip partnerships were formed with our existing RDCRN sites, but also there's a couple in yellow, probably can't see very well, but these were patient groups which sponsored these. So patient advocacy were able to get some of these up and running. So, you know, animal models, very expensive. That may be beyond the reach of a lot of our patient groups, but the tissue chips isn't. So this again shows a real opportunity here. How can we move the science forward faster? How can we make it more accessible? And how can we scale this up to our 7,000 or more diseases? So this is a pretty exciting area. So, and lastly, I'm just going to give a shameless plug here. Gene therapy, very exciting, moving forward very fast. So we're hosting a gene therapy workshop in August. So this is a public workshop. It's open to everyone. Registration is now open. We are partnering with FDA's Center for Biologics. There's since it's new technology and it's changing, there's a lot of uncertainty about how to approach these things. So we're partnering with FDA to try to get the regulatory opinion in there too. Again, the effort to try to move these things faster, but also very importantly, in a safe and effective manner. So if anybody would like to attend, there's webcasting, there's in-person attendance, there's no fee for registration. So please feel free to join us. I'll just finish with a few key points then. So first of all, very importantly, rare is not rare. 30 million, probably more than that. And we're just seeing increasing numbers, not just our understanding of diseases, but also splitting common diseases. So really rare is the future. We don't see this slowing down anytime soon. And so it's increasing much more attention. It's very gratifying, and seeing both the science but also the attention to rare disease move forward. We're very happy about that. It's also a time of just incredible opportunity. So just in the past year, so in August of last year, as many of you know, FDA approved the first gene therapy for rare cancer. It's a CAR T therapy for the B-cell leukemia in children. It was followed very shortly thereafter for another CAR T therapy in non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So a lot of work there. And that was followed a short time later by the third gene therapy, and this time it was for a rare genetic disease. In this case, it was a variant of retinitis pigmentosa. So we know there are a whole lot more now in the clinic, but also undergoing review for approval. So, you know, gene therapy is here, it's now, and cancer, particularly the blood cancers, are an area of just intensive research. But no sign of slowing down here. These are the orphan approvals. Again, a bit of a crowded slide, but I think you can appreciate the red bars are shooting up. Last year was a record year for orphan approvals at FDA, both across drugs and biologics. And this is not slowing down. It will be increasing. So all good news. But it's not just that. There's all other kinds of things. We've got 3D printing, bioprinting, AI uses, and the CRISPR and gene editing technologies. So, you know, stay tuned. Just hearing about new exciting advances really pretty much every day. So this is all wonderful news. And then the last point is, you know, please work with us. Just NIH, there was an article published in Proceedings of the National Academy of Science earlier this year, I think, where they looked at new drug approvals and novel drug approvals in the past 5 to 6 years. And what they found was 100% of these came out of research that was conducted with some NIH support. So a lot of that support was actually towards the earlier discovery, basic science end, but that's information that can be reused, recycled, reapplied in many different directions, which actually makes it more valuable. It may not be specific to the particular drug, but it's certainly the underpinnings. And again, I think NCI in cancer has been a real leader here. The human genome unraveling and work that continues there. These are things that can be used across the spectrum for everyone and are having real results in targeted therapies for patients. Finally, NIH is the largest public health funder for biomedical research in the world. And most of the budget, more than 80%, goes to the extramural. It goes to the research centers, the academicians, patient group support. It goes outside into the community to support this research. So most of these are your traditional R01 type grant, but it translates to about 50,000 grants per year, 300,000 researchers, and other programs. So my final point is I've thrown a lot of information at you. We do have a lot of programs. We really do want to engage. So if you want to connect with us, here's several ways. We go to our website, Facebook, Twitter, we have a newsletter, YouTube, but also I put my email down there. So if you'd like to hear more about any of our programs, you have any ideas about how to work with us, you're looking for research support of any kind, we would really like to hear from you. So, please be in touch and please let me know. So, time permitting, I guess, take a few questions.
Hello, there we go. Thank you, Dr. Pariser. I know that's a lot of kind of science and stuff, but I will say that, this is, for us in the U.S., this is our tax dollars at work. And one of the reasons why we do some of the programs and the initiatives of going to Capitol Hill and talking to Congress about budgets and how important it is to fund the NIH, when you hear those things, this is what that's doing. And so I think it's helpful to kind of see how these things connect and how they impact us, because I know for me, at least, sometimes it's a little abstract, like, what is this? How does this impact me? Why is this important? And we just got a little snippet, right, of what's going on at NCATS. And I think that as we in the foundation look at building our research roadmap in collaboration with our clinicians and the USCLC, and Dr. Olson and I were chatting last night about how to better partner and pull some of these things together and maybe collaborate better with NCATS and what's going on at the NIH to benefit all of us and move the research forward and bring new treatments and bring new understandings to everyone. So I think I personally kind of get geeked out about the science, and the chip thing I think is fascinating and amazing, and just the thoughts of what that might bring to be able to move things faster, which is really, really incredible. So I don't know, does anyone have any questions for Dr. Pariser? Oh, good, yay. I'm gonna run around the room. I'll start with Mike, I'll come back up here, and then I'll come over there. How about that?
Thank you for a great presentation. You mentioned about patient registries for rare disease organizations, and that roughly 12, I think, had established one through your resource thus far. Just curious about your perspective on why it was so low. Is it such an onerous process, so time-consuming? Is it that these organizations don't have enough personnel and resources to accomplish it? And the other question is, do you have a sense of when those best practices will be fully fleshed out to make it easier? Thank you.
Yeah, great question. Thanks. And I don't mean to imply there's only 12 registries out there. There are hundreds, thousands even, and people do them all kinds of different ways. The GRDR was actually a deliberate attempt to try to establish best practices and common data elements. And it's the common data elements especially that moves really slowly. It takes a lot of input. How do you get things that work across multiple diseases? And that's part of the reason why it just went really slowly. Now these registries were able to be stood up, and there were several years of data in many of them, and you know, it was successful in that regard. It was trying to scale this up times 7,000. So everything we do, it's like times 7,000. So how do we make it move faster? And that's why we kind of had to leave that behind. But there are other groups that are doing, you know, similar initiatives. For example, National Organization for Rare Disorders has their platform, as does Genetic Alliance working through PROCORI. There are other organizations, there are commercial entities that do this. The problem is everybody does it differently, and it's easy to understand why. The diseases are very different. But if we want the data to interact, we want it to move, this is why we have to focus on the best practices and data standards. So we're actively working on that right now. I'm hoping we're going to be able to put several things up on our website within the next year, but it's just, you know, it's always resource dependent.
One question. How are the physicians themselves notified of new therapies that are available, and how can the patient find out about the new therapies and follow them along the development of anything new?
Another great question. There's no one way. A lot of the physicians, particularly in specialties, subspecialties, they're all connected through their professional societies, usual continuing medical education, and they may not know about every new therapy, but the ones within their specialty, they usually learn about. For example, cancer, I'm sure you're all familiar with the massive ASCO meeting once a year where they go through all kinds of new developments, but most physicians are also part of professional organizations. You get mailings, you get CME, sort of kind of the traditional ways of doing that. Patients, we've seen a variety of ways that people stay in touch. One of the most effective is through patient foundations. Foundations have listservs, websites, social media has been a big boon to us, and we've found that it's really the patient-to-patient, foundation-to-foundation that is one of the most effective ways of spreading resources. There is a lot of information. The web, again, has been a big boom for us. A lot of information out there as how do you know if it's good information or not? And this is kind of the whole point behind something like GARD, but there are other sources trying to be a trusted resource where we can put some of those things up. So work with your foundation, certainly your researchers and your physicians, your community, but also the GARD resources available to you as well.
Yes, how do you get referrals for just a person that's been to 20 different hospitals and has had numerous tests, spent thousands and thousands of dollars? Can a patient or a physician refer directly to you to do testing to try to determine?
Yes. So again, please, that phone number I showed you on our GARD website, or you can submit an online.
I couldn't read that phone number.
Yeah. The slides are available.
Okay.
You can also Google NIH GARD and it will come up. So please contact us if you need any help. We talk with patients every single day, and we're happy to try to help if we can.
Thank you.
Just a quick note, folks, we will be posting these slides on our website about 2 weeks after our program. So if you missed anything, you can feel free to refer back to our website.
Not here, but any other questions?
Hi there. I just wondered, do you work with other countries and internationally as well?
Yes. So our clinical research network includes a number of international sites. U.S. law, the primary site needs to be in the U.S., but most of them partner internationally as well, and that's the way rare disease research works. We have small populations. We do tend to reach out geographically. International researchers can also request NIH grants, although sometimes they're restricted. There may need to be a U.S. partnership. And all of our other resources, our public resources, our information sites are open to anyone, including individual inquiries. We do get foreign inquiries, again, all the time. So those are all resources available to anyone.
Oh, that's great, because that's something that I can really take back, because while I was waiting for diagnosis, I just happened to find a small charity in the UK. It's only run by 3 people, and it's very much under-resourced as well. So thank you very much, and thanks for a great presentation as well.
Orphanet is the European equivalent of GARD, but also is patient advocacy, and they have a lot of resources as well. So I'd also urge you to be in touch with them. They do really good work.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you.
Mhm. So the question was, Dr. Olson yesterday talked about starting a registry at Duke. It was physician run, and they're trying to get people to register. We do not have registries that we specifically sponsor through the Office of Rare Disease Research, with the exception of all of the RDCRNs have registries. They have longitudinal observational studies that is a requirement of the network to have those going. So if it is part of our network, then people can participate that way. There are lots and lots, thousands of registries out there. They're started by patient groups. They are started by researchers. They are started by clinicians, foundations. So we are not directly connected with that registry. What we do urge people, though, is sometimes for one disease, there can be more than one registry. That's not ideal. And so if the registries can get together and work together, that is much better. You're going to include more of the disease and get a better description of the disease that way. So a lot of the academicians start this because nobody else is doing this, and the advantage of that is you can use the university software. Duke is a CTSA, for example. They have access to the REDCap software, which helps defray some of the cost of putting that together. Yeah, we don't sponsor individual registries. We had to stop that through the GRDR because, like I said, it was going too slow. What we're trying to focus more on are data standards across diseases. So she doesn't need to partner with us, but I would encourage her to keep in touch on the data standards initiatives that are going on. And that's just really because if the data, it can be standardized and interoperable, it can merge with other data, and then the data becomes much more powerful. Oh.
So this is a registry of a consortium of physicians across the U.S. as well as potential international members, and it would involve the CLF as well. So it is physician input as far as the data, and all the data forms have been created with all the features that we think we need in terms of determining prognosis. We have a virtual tissue bank planned for each site, which would then have access, for others outside to present some research protocols that could be translational studies. But I don't know exactly how we would interact with your office. I think it would be helpful to know if there's a way that we could apply other than through an R01 for financial support for the oversight, the regulatory issues, for example, and even the data input, which is currently volunteer effort.
Yeah, getting support for registries is surprisingly difficult. I think everybody agrees they're important. The problem is they're open-ended commitments. They don't have often a clean hypothesis you're trying to address, like your traditional R01 study would. So it's not something that's been traditionally funded. So that can be hard. Where you could interface with us, where I would suggest if you could take a look at the CTSA site for the data metrics. There's a lot of information a lot of work going on there, and I think that's where a lot of attention for the data standards and how to collect really good data is going on. And the informatics lead at NCATS is Ken Gersing, and I'd urge you to reach out to him to discuss what it is you're doing.
Yes, I wondered if we needed to be concerned that the budget was going to cut some of the monies for NIH.
Yeah, fortunately, that did not happen. I mean, obviously, we don't know year to year. NIH actually got a bit of an increase, and is it Beau Biden Cancer Moonshot actually specifically gave more money to cancer. So, hopefully that won't happen. Obviously, it's something I don't have any control over.
Okay.
But you have your voice. Patient voice is very powerful. Please continue to tell your stories, and please make sure that your Congress people know, because they do listen to you. So.
Thank you, Dr. Pariser, and thank you for all of your questions. And I think really appreciate you spending your Sunday morning with us. And